On this show, we'll be talking about how Christians should interpret Genesis.
Welcome to another episode of TGI Monday. We haven't got Ross here today, but we have got Paul back, who's been in the Holy Land. Did you have a good time? What were you doing?
Fab. Just go. Whether you believe in God or not, just go.
Why?
The weather's great, the food's great, the wine's great.
Of course, very important.
The people are great. The architecture, the history, the landscape. And if you do believe, there's that extra dimension. So, probably a highlight for me. Celebrating the Lord's Supper by the Sea of Galilee.
Oh.
Just because whatever churches they build on where they say what happened, they haven't figured out how to build churches on the Sea of Galilee yet. Mm. So you go out in a boat and you feel like this was how it was.
Wow.
It's cool.
So in short, you quite liked it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Today we've got a question from Steve, which came, I think, as a comment on YouTube. He asks, how should Christians interpret Genesis? Now, before we get going, Genesis is a big old book collection of writings that's 50 chapters. We think the question might refer more to do with what do we think about creation. So I think if we kick off with that and then see where we get to in our discussion, because there's a lot to say on all of this, as always. So who wants to kick off with thinking about how should Christians interpret Genesis? What do you reckon, Hal?
Well, I think the thing is with it is if you have to split Genesis up into three sections, really, in the sense you have the opening hymn, which is Genesis 1, then you have the story of the fall, which is Genesis 2 to 11, and then you've got the patriarch stories after that.
Okay, so pause then. If we're going to focus on creation, tell me about the hymn, why you would say it's a hymn.
Well, because imagine now, right, if I found this CD in 3,000 years, and I didn't even find the CD, I found the lyrics, right? How would I know, right, that this was a song? Well, the thing is, if you went to, say, this one here, Born of a Broken Man, right? Yes, really cool track. Rage Against... Another Rage fan.
Indeed.
Yeah, getting some decent quality music on this now.
Hey,
so you
don't miss the Genesis.
Well, they were rubbish after Peter Gabriel left, right? Yeah, all right. So, if I read this literally, right, not as a song, it would make absolutely no sense.
Read as a
right, yeah. So it says, my fear hunt me down, capturing my memories. The frontier of loss, they try to escape across the street where Jesus stripped bare. Right? Mm-hmm. Would make no sense unless you knew it was a song. And the reason we know it's a song is because it's got verses and a chorus.
So are there verses and a chorus in the creation
Yes,
stories?
there are, because what you have to do is look at the first chapter of Genesis and compare it to something else from the similar culture which is a song. So if you compare it to a psalm, right, it's got the same structure as a psalm. So it's got a refrain that it comes back to. Evening came and morning came the first day. Evening came and morning came the second day. Right? So it's what's known as parallelism. So what we have to do is remember that we're reading something from 3,000 years ago in a different culture, and if we found Rage Against the Machine in 3,000 years, how would we know it's a song?
So we've been talking about context before and about how we read the Bible, and talking about different kinds of writings that are in this crazy collection of things that is the Bible, including Genesis. What do you reckon, Mary? Is it a song? Do you read it as a song?
Well, I've not heard that before. I like it very much. I think it very well could be. I take it personally from the view of a historian, in a sense, because my first degree was history and religious studies, and one of the things that I did study was historicity, the idea that the very nature of history and how we read it has changed throughout time. We now stick to quite a strong idea of a chronological history. That's what we're interested in.
Well, that meaning one thing happened at this time, then the next thing happened, then the next thing happened.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we're still profoundly challenged by the fact that different people will see history from their different perspectives, and so you can never tell exactly what happened. But we like to think that we can. But so when we read that back into the Bible, actually we don't get the same history that they were expecting to get from it. They weren't expecting it to be the same sort of chronological accuracy that we're expecting.
But they didn't write it like that.
Exactly.
Because history, as we understand it, hadn't been invented yet. It's like looking for a mobile phone in the Bible and saying, there's no mobile phones in here. But it's
Yeah,
not
but
there.
yeah, there are lots and lots of Christians who read it and think, well, the Bible is the Word of God, and therefore we can't just go deciding what we think it means. And when I became a Christian, I was part of a church that did take the creation story literally, and actually it took a while for me to go, oh, it's all right. We're allowed to use reason and to listen to more than one voice on this stuff, but. Actually, that takes quite a lot of almost permission in that sort of tradition. That's your tradition, isn't it? Where you came from, Dan?
No, my tradition isn't. It wasn't a.
You weren't a creationist?
No, not at all. I was very much trying to reconcile evolution with the Bible for the longest time. And my experience of creationism was only a very kind of short walk in my Christian journey. But when I was at university and I was trying to reconcile these two things, I didn't have the kind of things that Mary was saying and Harold was saying and playing in my mind. I would have found that very helpful to know that at the time. We had some scientists coming in from Swansea University showing us pictures of cows with wings and all kinds of things like that, saying that you can't evolve from one creature into another. If you believe the Bible is God's word, there can't be any mistakes in it. And at the time, it made a lot of sense to me. And so the more I read, and then I found that a lot of creationists were very intelligent people, very articulate people, there's a lot of integrity in what they believe, and creationists I'm friends with now still are those people. I'm not knocking them as people, but to me it became clear after a while that there was a problem. One of the problems I had was when I was trying to evangelize to people, I didn't just have to tell them that Jesus was the Son of God and born of a virgin. I also had to tell them that dinosaurs lived 4,000 years ago and humans used to have to ride on their backs.
Which is a problem.
And that was a huge stumbling block. It also meant I had to fight a scientific battle with scientists before I could get anywhere into theology, and of course I would lose. I had a whopping defeat from my scientific brother-in-law on it, and when I started to study some Hebrew, I noticed there's this word rakia, which means firmament, and what it's describing in Genesis, and it's in the first chapter of Genesis, is a solid dome covering the earth. An early cosmology, which basically means the way that the people in the Bible understood the universe around them, was that there were waters above the earth, and that they lived on like dry land, and what separated the waters from the earth was a solid dome. They had no sides, all they had was their eyes, and that's how intelligent people perfectly reasonably in their age understood it.
Yeah, using the knowledge that they got.
Using the knowledge, we'd all believe
context.
that. Absolutely right to do so. Job describes it as a dome made of lead. Ezekiel describes it as a dome made of sapphire. We read in the Noah story there were windows on that dome which allowed the water to come through. And what I realised very quickly was that the cosmology of the early church, Israelites was very different to what we understand today. Yeah. And so Genesis is a book about wonderful theology that I take very seriously, but I do exactly what Mary does. You have to put it in its historical context.
But isn't it the scariest thing about all this really is if we have to see how Genesis has been interpreted throughout Christian history, and this idea of taking Genesis literally is only very, very recent. If you read what if you read what John Calvin said, if you read what St. Augustine said, read what Irenaeus said, if you go all the way through Christian history, right up until very, very recently, people haven't understood this literally at all.
It was the 1800s.
Well,
that
the 1800s.
Fundamentalism really took hold, and actually it was a very small group to begin with, and it's grown a bit, but it's still not, I would say, mainstream within the church. It's not taken over Catholicism, it's not taken over Anglicanism and other churches, but it is a fairly
it's not that recent. Calvin certainly, I've read Calvin's commentary on Genesis to look at this, and Calvin certainly is a creationist.
He
gets it from Augustine, but
he's not a literalist, is he?
Well, he is.
Let's not get bogged down in who said what about what.
But so I don't think it starts with the fundamentalist movement, but I do think that we need to realise that people at different times in history have a different understanding on the universe according to their ability to observe it.
Absolutely.
Well, I think as well, the dome with the holes in it is probably just as accurate as the Fred Hoyle's static universe was in the 1950s,
Exactly.
because now it's also... The only constant in scientific cosmology is there's definitely no God, even when all the different ones contradict each other. So it's actually quite a funny thing to do, actually.
But in all of this stuff, it's really... I had something very helpful, and I was listening to a podcast on this, and I will post it in the link below. And he was this academic was talking about how Jesus, not a book, was the fullest revelation of who God is. And so everything we read needs to be read through that lens of Jesus-shaped morality, compassion, all of that stuff. And Jesus constantly was using bits of Old Testament to do that. Paul, what do you reckon?
Okay, how should Christians interpret Genesis? I don't like the words should and shouldn't. There should be enough food for everyone on the planet. There shouldn't be people starving to death, as most Westerners are struggling with obesity. How I would suggest to look at it is think about the bigger picture, as big as you can go. So rather than getting stuck in details, because the details change from person to person, era to era, the more we find out. Hal, I'm sorry I disagree with you. There are lots of scientists who are cosmologists who believe in God.
No, I know. I understand that, but I'm just saying.
I think Hal quite believes in God as well, actually.
How would I suggest to interpret it? That God made the universe, God made us, and put us in that universe, or allowed us to exist, develop, evolve, whatever word you want to use. Let's not argue about it. God made it. I think language is problematic. For example, I say I love my wife. You completely understand what I mean. If I say I love pizza, you know what I mean also.
Yeah.
But I don't love pizza the way I love my wife and vice versa. I love my sister, I love my mother, I love my brother, I love my dog. I don't love them the same way I love my wife.
Well, that's a relief, and that's probably
we understand the differences.
Yeah,
So
no, that's true. I think we're out of
But I
time.
think the
If I
thing
could
is-
say one thing, I would say that I know people who are very intelligent and articulate from all different corners of this argument.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think you don't have to interpret it in one way. So if we're thinking about how you should interpret Genesis, I think you should interpret it in the way that really helps you to get closer to God.
Well, and actually, that's why we're doing.
I don't agree with
that's
that.
why TGI Monday is a representation of a range of views all the time.
No, I don't agree with that.
Not on this issue.
You haven't got it. You haven't got it on this.
No. But I think what I would say with that though is that if you're going to take a very literalistic view of Genesis, right, you have to be very, very careful that you don't turn the text of the Bible itself into an idol. And that is the fundamental problem with this whole discussion.
Yeah, I don't think Mary was disputing that actually. But,
No, but
anyway,
I
this
think
is one of those things that
Mary's
goes
saying
on and on.
people
and
aren't
we have-
stupid, are they?
No, they're not.
No, people aren't
I agree with you on
stupid.
that entirely.
People aren't stupid, and words mean one thing. I think your example of you love your wife and you love pizza, and so when we're looking at words, we need to know about the context, and the reality is we don't, and so what we can agree on is that there are words that we use to express God's relationship to people. And that those words have had a life of their own and have been passed through generations and traditions, orally and written. Anyway, this could just keep going on and on and on. So what do you think? Let us know and join in the conversation, because we definitely will as soon as we switch off the camera. Continue to like us on Facebook and follow us in all the usual places. So keep the chat going.
Dinosaurs have
What
feathers.
would be
Sorry,
useful?
that's very hard.
These are naked dinosaurs.
What
These
I was
are
hoping to go on to.
Good evening, Mr. Bond. What's